Aloha and good morning. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there. This is the day we celebrate you and give thanks for moms everywhere. And this is something that, it's not a scriptural holiday or anything, but the Bible does teach us to honor our father and mother, that it will go well with us. It'll add years to our life. And this week I saw a YouTube short for you. Those didn't see our pre-announcement today. One of my YouTube shorts, the guy was teaching from the pulpit, and he said, I learned that verse growing up, honor your father and mother, that they'll add years to your life. And I thought it meant that you better do what she says or she'll kill you. And so, he found out later that wasn't the true interpretation. But, the mind of a child, I can understand exactly how he came to that. So today we're going to look at some Proverbs, actually one in particular, Proverbs 31, which is the only proverb is actually in the book of Proverbs attributed to a woman. And if any of you know this proverb, it's attributed to a mother. And that's why I want to start with that today on Mother's Day, Proverbs 31. And we're going to go over to Daniel 11. And now I had a request from Rosie and Armin. Rosie asked me if I would not speed through Daniel 11 and give the whole history in detail, because she likes it. It helps her faith. And I learned it all. To me, it's a lot of history in this chapter, because it's a prophetic chapter that tells us who's going to be the next person in line after the next person, after the next person, that next person. And it's prophecy. It was given to Daniel as the angelic watcher told him what was going to come after him. Remember, we did last week the vision that he had where he saw the 70 weeks explained to him and how long it was going to be, and 70 years it was. And so he's already been in captivity 68 years. So he's going, hey, we're getting close. And he's going to get more revealed to him. Now, this is important to us as believers, because in Ezekiel the prophet, he records this one kind of catchphrase over and over. Some of you know this phrase. He said that the Lord declared, I am the Lord your God, and I will tell you what will come to pass before it comes to pass, so that when it comes to pass, you will know that I am the Lord. I'm going to show you that I know the future. And you can put it really helps having a God who knows what's going to happen, instead of like, can you imagine serving a God and you're thinking, I got my God, I carved him out of a little stump of wood, and he's dumb, he can't hear it. I put ears on him, but he doesn't really hear, or eyes, and he doesn't really see. That's what false idols are. They don't have knowledge like the Creator. When we carve something out of creation, it says we're stupid. We are exchanging the Creator of all things for creation. And that's foolishness. That's idolatry. And we don't want to fall into that. And so the scripture teaches us to serve the Creator of all things. He knows all these things, and he tells us in prophetic scriptures so that we can have more assurance in our faith. We don't have to wonder, I wonder if God knows. Do you ever do that? Do you ever wake up and go, I wonder if God knows what's going to happen? My wife always says, I don't know what's going to happen, but I wish I knew. So the biggest trial for us is we don't know. If we would just rest in that he knows, I think we do a lot better in our Christian journey. But today I'm going to show you some words that I wish that the guys that will follow in this prophetic lineup that Daniel describes in Daniel 11 would have just paid attention to the words that came. Well, if these are indeed Lemuel, by the way, some people say, who is Lemuel in the biblical story? Who's King Lemuel? And the truth is, we don't have a record of a Lemuel in like serving as king in Israel. But Lemuel in Hebrew, Lem is for, and El for Elohim, for God, one who's for God. So this is, we know a Proverbs 31, that is written from the perspective of a mom telling her son, who's a king. Now she is speaking to a son who's already, in the role of a king. And so she's going to give him instructions on how to be a good king, but not just a good king, but a good husband. And I find it interesting because some scholars speculate that Lemuel is just a nickname for Solomon. And if that's the case, who was Solomon's mom? Do you guys remember? Bathsheba. And Bathsheba, you guys know the story about David and Bathsheba, right? So would you turn to Proverbs 31 and let's look at this written instructions that was given from mom to her son. It starts in Proverbs 31 verse 1 with this. It says, the words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mother taught him. What, O my son, and what, O son of my womb, and what, O son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, or your ways to that which destroys kings. It's not for kings, Lemuel, is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink, lest they forget what is decreed. I had to wait for the motorcycle to rip by. And living in Hawaii, we have open housing here, so we hear everybody down below. He says, then, lest we forget and what's decreed and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Now give strong drink to him who's perishing, and wine to him whose life is bitter. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his trouble no more. But as for you, as a king, is a king supposed to be given to strong drink? No, because he might forget what was decreed. Now he says, open your mouth for the dumb and for the rights of the unfortunate. The dumb here means the one whose tongue is tied. They can't speak. The one who can't speak out. You're a king. You need to open your mouth for the rights of those who can't speak out for themselves, and for the rights of the unfortunate. Open your mouth and judge righteously and defend the rights of the afflicted and the needy. So these are her first words to him as how to be a good king. Don't be given to strong drink, so you don't forget what's decreed. Be a champion for those who can't speak out themselves. Look after the afflicted and the needy. Now, is that a good attitude for a king? She's given him sage advice here. This is solid stuff here, that if he wants to really prosper, this is what he should do with his power as a king. And now she's going to turn her attention toward the picking of the queen. It says a wife, and if he's the king, then of course her title will be the queen, right? Mm-hmm. So listen to this. Here in picking a good queen are the descriptions of an excellent wife, an excellent queen. In fact, she says in verse 10, an excellent wife who can find? For her worth is far above jewels. Now, if this is Bathsheba telling Solomon, pet name Lemuel, now I'm not saying it is for certain. That's just a speculative thing. But some mom told some king these words. And she said that if you find an excellent wife, she's worth more than jewels. This is how valuable she is. And it says in verse 11, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. Because he's married to her, he doesn't have to worry. When I was a young man, we were in college and career study, and some guy made a joke in our little Bible study. My wife was baking bread, and she goes, we ran out of butter. I've got to run to the store and get us some butter. And I love fresh baked bread with, hot, and smear the butter on it. And she grabs the checkbook and starts to head to the door. And one of the guys goes, oh no, she's got the checkbook. Watch out. She'll spend all the money, And I said, you apologize to my wife. And he said, why? And he wouldn't. He was stubborn. He was stubborn. Young men, how stubborn, stiff-necked they can be sometimes. So he didn't think it was. He thought, I'm just making a joke. I said, it says in the Proverbs 31 that the heart of the husband trusts in her, and he'll have no lack of gain. I'm not worried about her having the checkbook. She never does me wrong with the checkbook. So he wouldn't apologize. So I grabbed him by the back of the shirt and threw him out of our house. Now, some of you don't get mad at me, but this guy, trust me, he deserved it. And he stood outside on the sidewalk, and he was mad. And I said, well, you want to come back in and apologize first to my wife and apologize. You said this comment about her being, you can't trust her with the money. Then in front of everyone, you belittled her. So you go and apologize in front of everyone. I want the apology to match the offense. And the guy was so mad. Like, I'll tell her I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go in the room and say, I said, then you're not welcome back in Bible study. See you later. And you guys are, some of you are smirking, but listen, you ought to know me as a young Sicilian boy. This is not something you mess with, and you don't mess with my wife. And so I said, you don't get it. The proverb says, I don't have to worry. My heart can trust in her. Now, how does it make Jan feel, my wife, that I stand up in front of everybody and say, I trust her? Is that good for women? Is that good for you to have a husband? By the way, everyone teaches this. I remember well, they teach this. Well, he stood out on the sidewalk having a fit, and Jan went right onto the store. But he, you know, eventually after sulking, and I started the study and everything, and he finally came in and apologized, but he didn't like it. And I thought, man, you just don't get it. Proverbs 31 is, they always teach it as, here's instructions for the wife. You know, we're going to have a women's conference. We're going to study Proverbs 31 on how to be an excellent wife. And I've heard so many sermons on the wife, but if you can receive it, this is actually about a Proverbs 31 man. Because you can't have a Proverbs 31 woman unless she has a Proverbs 31 man. And I'm going to show you some of this passage that point out what the man has to be like so that the woman can become that excellent wife. He's got to be one that stands up for her and shows that he trusts in her. And he doesn't have to worry about having any lack of gain that he's gained because of her. You know, that jokes like that should be banished from the Christian circle. We never joke, you know, oh no, watch out, she has the checkbook, or oh no, she's going to go waste all the money frivolously. No. In fact, it says in verse 12, she does him good and not evil all the days of her life. Now, when I turn to Daniel, I'm going to show you someone didn't read this passage when we get to the history of what comes down in Daniel 11 in the first 7 verses. But anyway, it says she looks for verse 13 for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She's like a merchant ships. She brings food from afar. She rises also while it's still night and gives food to her household and portions to her maidens. Now, she's not lazy sleeping in. She's up before the crack of dawn. That's my wife. She's the morning bird, I call her, the blue bird of happiness. She's up early preparing the food. She considers a field and buys it. From her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. This gal has got it together. And she senses that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. She stretches out her hand to the needy and to the distaff, and she grasps the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. She stretches out her hands to the needy. She's a generous gal, looking out for others too. And she's not afraid of the snow for her household, for all of her household are clothed with scarlet. She makes coverings for herself, and her clothing is fine linen and purple. Now that's the purple is for royalty, right? So she's a queen, so this is fitting. Now it says in verse 23, her husband is known where? In the gates. Now, who sat in the gates of the city? The judges who would give rulings over, you know, if somebody had a squabble with a neighbor, they'd come before the elders of the city at the gates and say, you know, we got this problem. This guy's been, you know, doing this and letting his animals over on my side of the fence. And what do we do? And the judges had to give the ruling. Okay. They were the ones that they looked to as, and she says that he is known as being one of those guys they turn to for counsel, for wisdom, for instruction. When he sits amongst the elders of the land. Verse 24, now she makes linen garments and sells them. She supplies belts to the tradesmen. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her, and her husband also. And he praises her, saying, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Now, this is something that the guys don't study, but they should. If the gal is industrious and she gets into a business, and I don't care what she's doing. I mean, she could be baking goods and selling them, and all of a sudden she's the cupcake queen of the world. And some guys are like, give me all the money from your endeavor, gal. That's not right. It says give her the product of her hands. Let her works praise her. She's doing a good job, then she's the cupcake queen, yay. But you don't take away that thing that she worked hard for. She worked for it. And if you're going to be an excellent husband to an excellent wife, you have to let the things that she worked hard for come to her. It seems like, to me, this seems like totally simple wisdom, but some guys don't follow this. If their gal is successful, they're jealous, and they don't want to let them have the fruit of their labor. That's a mistake. Let me tell you, that will lead to the demise of a really good thing that you have going for you, instead of it, because it will turn out to be a blessing if you let her have the things that she worked for. She might even come to you like my wife did one time and said, well, honey, I know you're working hard in the ministry, and we just barely scrape by the way, just to get pay the bills and the utilities, all the stuff. My paycheck barely paid that stuff. But my wife worked as a medical technologist in Jesse Owens Memorial. It was like a standalone emergency room there in South Phoenix, terrible part of town. And she's over there working really hard, and they started giving her more hours, like double shift, triple shift, and keeping her, like, they put a cot in the back and said, you can sleep when you're not being called for an emergency to do the blood work, but we need you here for like 3 shifts in a row. Now the good part was they upped the pay every time they kept her longer. She'd go, I'm getting like time and a half for the second shift and triple time, and so she was making good money. And she comes to me one time, she goes, am I allowed to use my money to take us on vacation? I was thinking, what do you have in mind? She goes, there's a billboard by the house that says all inclusive to Jamaica, and I can afford it. Do you want to go? And I was like, sure. Let me ask Pastor John. So I asked Pastor John Higgins, can I go? My wife wants to go on a vacation to Jamaica. It's something called an all-inclusive. Now we're young. We don't know what all-inclusive means. Like, I never experienced all. Some of you are snickering. You know what it is, but we didn't know. We didn't know that meant everything that you want to eat, all the snorkels, all the stuff that you want to play with. Everything is included at the resort. You pay one price to get in, and then it's like, go have fun. Everything is included. And so we get there and we're 2 young, skinny kids that are early in our marriage, and we're just like, wow, we can order whatever we want on the menu. There's no prices, steak and lobster. I order steak and lobster, and the guy's like brings me this beautiful plate, and we're in Jamaica, and they got really good lobster. And I was like, this is the bomb, man. This is great. And then they come and offer dessert, and my wife looks at me, and I look at the guy, and she's like, he's not much a dessert guy. He would rather have like another steak would be dessert to him. And the guy brought me another steak, a fillet. I was like, this is the best, But when you're a metasaurus like me, that was like pretty good. So I was like, this is all inclusives are my favorite now. I want to do them all the time. And that was because of a simple application of one verse in the Bible. Give her the product of her hands. Let her works praise her. She did all the work for that. She gets to do what she wants with that. And I got to be the benefit. Guys, I'm just telling you, see, it works out. You just got to quit being selfish and let God work through your wife to be, she's made to be a blessing. She blesses others. She blesses the needy. Do you know that there are some men that won't let their wives give to the needy and the distaff and the poor? Like, no, you can't do that, huh? And she's got it on her heart. She's a generous woman. She wants to, she's like going through her closet going, I don't wear this anymore. I don't need this. Let me see who I can bless. Let her do those things. See, if you're a Proverbs 31 man, you have to let the women succeed in these areas. You have to let them be generous. You cannot be an uptight, cranky guy And by the way, I'm speaking to some of you Christian men out there that you need a little attitude adjustment, because there are guys that don't let their wives become the Proverbs 31 woman because they don't give them the support. They don't say, "Yeah, go for it, honey. You want to bless those people? Go ahead. That's great. That's a good idea." See, you have to be the Proverbs 31 man so she can become the Proverbs 31 woman. Now, let's turn to Daniel chapter 11. And I don't know, I should probably just wait till next week to do this, but I'll just do a couple verses for you. This is just for you, Rosie. Happy Mother's Day. Yeah, Rosie and Armin were here, our dear friends from Canada. And she was like, I really want you to take your time, give all the details. All right. Remember that the angel had come in chapter 10 and began to describe the spiritual battle going on behind the scenes. I was fighting against the prince of Persia, and I was on my way. I was dispatched to you from the minute you prayed, Daniel, but I was withheld because there was spiritual battle going on. And now I'm here, and I'm here to reveal to you these things and give you understanding. And so he says, in verse, let me just read you the last verse of chapter 10 of Daniel. He says, however, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. Yet there's one who stands with me firmly against these forces. None except, he says, except for Michael, your prince. Remember, we talked about Michael, the archangel, and he was with him. And he says, and in the first year of Darius, the Mede, I arose to become protection for him. So this is the angel saying, I arose to be protection. Now, this is something that's kind of cool in the spiritual goings on of this passage, is that we're seeing that there are angelic beings in charge of looking after the empires that are being raised up. They're literally angels behind the scenes fighting for the rulerships and who's ruling next. And so the angel says, in the first year of Darius, remember that we studied this earlier in chapter 9, that's 538 BC. If you're a person that likes to be on the timeline like me, first year of Darius, the Mede, I arose to become encouragement and protection for him. Now, when I first read this, I thought this was Daniel arose to be protection. No, it's the angel saying, I arose. And now he says, I'll tell you the truth. Angel's going to tell Daniel the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a fourth will gain far more riches than all of them. And as soon as he becomes strong enough through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece. And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he is arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendant, nor according to his own authority, which he wielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others beside them. Now, I'm just going to start with these first 5 verses for you today, specifically verses 2 to verse 4, the end here. This is the first paragraph of the chapter, and it says, he says, I tell you, there'll be 3 more kings that are going to arise in Persia. Now, this is the angel saying, I arose to become protection for Darius, or some people pronounce it Darius, the Mede. And this is the ruler of the Mede kingdom. But remember, the arms and chest of silver was the Medo what kingdom? Persian kingdom. It was a collaboration between Darius and Cyrus. And it says, and after this, Cyrus is going to be the first of the Persian kingdom reigning. But after Cyrus is going to come 4 more, okay? And the first one will be his son, Ahasuerus, or Cambyses is another name he has, the son of Cyrus, and he's going to be the first in the lineup. Now, it says here there's going to be 3, and then 1 gain more strength than all of them. So Cambyses comes first, and he rules, if you want to write it down, from 530 to 522 BC. Then after him, in history, we read there's a guy named Pseudosmerdis. He's also known as Artaxerxes. So I'm telling you both names because if you read in the Persian history books, it's going to be Pseudo-Smyrnus. If you read in the Hebrew documents about him, it's Artaxerxes. It's the same guy. Okay, just so you know. And he only rules for 1 year, 522 BC. He doesn't get a lot, like much time at all. I don't think I want to be a ruler. When I read how long some of these guys make it, it's not good at all. Then after him, number 3 is Darius the second. Now his also named Histapus. Now he rules from 521 to 486 BC. He actually gets one of the longer rulings in the Persian Empire. And then lastly comes Xerxes or Ahasuerus, also from 485 to 465 BC. And he's the strongest of all of them, of the Persian kings. If you study the history over there in the Middle East, these guys are listed in their history books, and they ruled. But as soon as he becomes great, he gets this itch to go against the kingdom of Greece. Now, at the time that Daniel is being told this, 538 BC, Greece is nothing. But we're fast forwarding to 465 BC. So we've gone, about 60, 70 years into the future. Is Daniel still alive, by the way, 60, 70 years into the future? No. Wait. 538 BC. Daniel is how old? Remember, he's taken captive in 606 BC. He spent 68 years in captivity by this point. So at 68 years of captivity that Daniel has spent, plus he was taken as a teen, remember? So I'm just gonna round 70 years. He's almost to 70 years of captivity. Let's say he was 15. He's 83 years old when the angel tells him this in the first year of Darius. 83. I don't think he lives another 66 years to see Greece become a kingdom. Now, why do I point this out? Because he's dead already. But the fact is that the angel told him who's going to be the next in line. And this, by the way, this next part gets even more detailed. And this is the part that scholars struggle with. They're like, Daniel can't have written this when he wrote it because it's too accurate and it gives too much details. It must have been, they try to give the book of Daniel a date of like 166 BC. And I'm like, come on, guys. You obviously didn't do your homework. Have you ever heard of the Septuagint version of the Bible? It's Septuagint means 70 in Greek, and it's when it was done completed around 221, 220 BC. It was commissioned, and it was 70 scholars that spoke both Hebrew and Greek were told to take the Old Testament scriptures and convert them over to Greek, because Greece had at this time been in power, and the Grecian Empire had a lot of influence from the time when Alexander the Great came into power. And by the way, he's coming in around 336 to 323 BC. So their influence of the Grecian Empire, the Greeks were always into like, let's build big libraries, let's gain knowledge, let's get all this stuff together. And so they got scholars that could speak Hebrew and said, we want to put in our collection all these Hebrew books. That they got this whole thing. They're really big on these. They call them their scriptures. That's the Tanakh, the Torah, and the books of Moses, and their prophets. And so translated all their books from Hebrew into Greek for us. And that became what we call the Septuagint version. Some of you guys know the King James Bible. It was taken from scholars that studied they only knew Greek, so they studied and they translated from Greek to Latin, from Latin to English, and what we call King James English in 1811. So this is all, I'm only giving you the backstory because this is stuff that was foretold to Daniel before Daniel dies. And Daniel doesn't live until the Grecian Empire. He's not even, in fact, at the time when Daniel's writing this, Greece is nothing. And what?
What about Cyrus? He was alive when Cyrus came.
Yes, but Cyrus is in five. This is in the first year of Darius, 538 BC. Mm-hmm. Cyrus comes into power 535 BC, just 3 years later. So 71 years into Daniel's captivity. So Daniel is alive, yes, when Cyrus is the very first king, but we're told that there will be three more kings after Cyrus. One of them, of course, being Cyrus's son, there Cambyses or Ahasuerus, who takes over next, and then after him Pseudo-Smyrtus, after him Darius II, Hystapus, and then after him Xerxes or Ahasuerus, he's also called, from 485 to 465 BC. Now, how could Daniel know all of these guys coming up when they're not even born yet? Okay, these guys that are going to be coming, and he's going to name he's going to talk about three that will follow in the rulership of the Persian Empire, and then after the fourth one that comes, the mightiest of them, which is historically Xerxes. He's going to rouse the empire against the empire of the realm of Greece. Now, you guys know who ruled Greece, right? The name you learned in probably history book. Who was it? Alexander the Great, with his army of 2.5 million men that comes and takes on the Persian army and he wipes the floor with them, so to speak, and takes over. He becomes the next world ruling. Greece replaces the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, if you know the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw, the vision, head of gold, arms and chest of silver, right? Then the loins, he saw a bronze. So we got the head of gold, the Babylonian Empire, the arms and chest of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, the loins of bronze, the Grecian Empire. Now comes the legs of iron and we know what that is because it was already revealed to Daniel. It's the legs of iron are the Roman Empire that will come after the Grecian Empire. But this is not yet done being described by the angel. The angel's got a few more details to tell Daniel, just so we would have a little more confidence in our scriptures. Listen to this. As soon as the Alexander the Great, the mighty great king with authority, does as he pleases, in verse 3, as soon as he's arisen, his kingdom's going to be broken up and parceled out, it said, toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants. Now remember, Alexander the Great, his own son doesn't become the next king, because if you know history, Alexander the son's actual physical son was severely retarded. I know it's not politically correct to say today, but that's what I was taught in history class, that he was so retarded that it would be like he couldn't serve as a king. So instead, when Alexander the Great actually gets done conquering the whole known world, he's like, I am bored, has a party, a drunken party where he drinks too much, and should have read what it says to Lemuel in Proverbs 31 to not be given to strong drink, but he drank so much that he walked home in the rain. Do you guys know this? Did you learn this in history class? Alexander the Great walks home in the rain, gets severely soaked, falls down, passes out in his wet clothes, and winds up with pneumonia and dies. That's what okay, I conquered the whole known world. I'm the ruler, the mightiest king, and I have nothing left to do, so I just have a party, drunken orgy, and then walk home in the rain and then catch pneumonia and die. What a non-glorious way to go for the guy that's like one of them, written up as the mighty king. So who takes over? Now, we went over this when we did Daniel chapter 8, but just for those that weren't with us, I'm going to flip back a page. So all my notes, I can't fit them all on each page, so I had to write it next to Daniel 8. In Daniel chapter 8, when we learned about the vision that was given of the ram and the goat, and the horns that came up, and he said, I saw I saw this mighty one come, and he was enraged at him. He struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground, trampled on him. There was none to rescue the ram. The male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in his place came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. This is the same kind of description, the 4 points of the compass or the four winds of the heaven. This mighty horn is snapped off. That's Alexander the Great. And in his place, his four generals wind up dividing his kingdom. Cassander gets Macedonia. Lysimachus gets Thrace and much of Asia Minor. Seleucus, his general, gets Syria. And Ptolemy, he gets Egypt. Those are the four commanders that take the kingdom of Greece and divide it into four parts. Basically, we each pick our territories and rule it. And just like it says, repeated here by the angel to Daniel again, he says that this guy, this mighty king, will have his, not to his descendants, but to his sovereignty is going to be uprooted and given to the 4 points of the compass. And so then he says in verse 5, then the king of the south will grow strong. Oh, that's Ptolemy the first, Soter. And he's going to grow strong, and he's going to gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. His domain will be a great dominion indeed. And after some years, they'll form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. Now, if you guys know history, this is where I wish they would have read this proverb that we started with today. Because the king of the daughter of the king of the south, her name was Bernice. I have a friend named Bernice that greeted me when I came to Hawaii. I affectionately call her Bernice, just because my Italian pronunciation. Bernice. And Bernice here, she is the daughter of the king of the south, Ptolemy II. And this is Philadelphia. This is, if your history books, he reigned from 285 to 246 BC. So some time has gone by. We were at 538 BC at the beginning of the chapter, and now we're at 285. So, two and a half centuries have gone by, and this is where they really have trouble with this. That the king of the south gives his daughter to the king of the north, which is Antiochus Theos. He's the guy that reigns from 262 to 227 in the north. And so the peaceful arrangement, if you study history, is that the king from one kingdom gives his daughter to the king of the other kingdom, hoping that, kind of she'll be like kind of an inner plant. I learned this in history as she was like sent as, okay, I'm giving you my daughter, but she's loyal to me. So Ptolemy's thinking, I'm going to give you my daughter to Antiochus, and Antiochus, she'll spy for me on the king of the north. And it says, but she will not retain her position of power, nor will she remain with his power, but she will be given up along with those who brought her in and those who sired her, as well as he who supported her in those times. Well, it's interesting. Antiochus, the guy that was the king of the north, he divorced his wife to take Bernice. We're making a peace treaty, and I'm going to take the other king's daughter. And so he divorces his wife. Later, when Ptolemy II dies, when his father-in-law dies, he's like, I'm over Bernice. I only married her for this peace agreement. So he got rid of Bernice, and he took his wife back, his first wife that he set aside to do this whole peace treaty deal. The problem was that she in turn went and poisoned him, then killed Bernice and her sons, just so that her sons would be in line to be the next to take over the kingdom. You don't want to mess with a woman. Now, on Mother's Day, I can't tell you how. Remember, we started with a proverb, what was spoken from a mother of a king, right? She was a mother of a king telling her son, be careful that you get a woman, and that one that you can trust, your heart can trust in her and have no lack of gain. Could you trust in these gals? Man, they first of all, dad thought he could trust his own daughter to be a spy, a plant, and she turns out to be loyal to the other side. She doesn't go with dad's plan. But then when dad dies, she gets set aside. And she gets what do you call it, scorned or betrayed. So what she do? She goes and poisons the guy, then kills the other gal and her sons. By the way, this is why I think being in royalty is not all that it's cracked up to be. I mean, even if you're just a kid of a king, you got to watch your back because you're in line for you might have a scorned mother-in-law or a scorned, stepmom who doesn't want you to be in line to get the kingdom. So what she do? She kills your mom and your brothers and you just so that her kids will be in line to be the next king of the north of Syria of this. So this is all that went down just from, and by the way, this is only lining up the history books with the book of Daniel with the prophetic things. And this is not anywhere near the amount of information I have for you guys. I'm sorry, but this chapter is just kicking off. If you study world history, this is where, if the scholars say they couldn't have written this when they did because it's too accurate, it goes all the way down to the 200 BC. We got to give Daniel a date like 166 BC, not that he wrote it in 538 or this it can't be because it's got too much details of what's going to happen with who. And I wrote in my Bible when I was a young man. One of the pastors said, "Figures don't lie, but liars can sure figure." It's amazing how that they can come up with these silly things. And skeptics of the Bible, I have news for you. The Septuagint version of the Bible was 220 BC. So picking a date of 166. Which one is first, by the way, for you on the timeline? Some people they get a little confused by this. And the Septuagint version was done before 166 BC. Do you understand that? That means that the book of Daniel was translated from Hebrew into Greek before the speculative date that they come up with that it was written. I'm like, excuse me, if there's already a record of it being included in a translation some 60 years earlier than the date you speculated, I think you're a dumb speculator. Okay? It's funny how these people act like they're such authorities, but they won't study history. And you do a little bit of homework, please, because you should have at least picked a date like, I don't know, 230 BC instead of 166 for a date. But because of the date you did pick, you overlooked a very, very significant nugget of history that included the book of Daniel already translated from Hebrew to Greek 60 years earlier than your speculative date. Well, liars can sure figure, but they don't figure right. And I love this part of scripture because for me, I think, man, you knew all this stuff ahead. The angels telling Daniel this stuff before it ever happened. Now why? What? And I cheated. I read ahead in Daniel 11 and 12. The whole rest of the book of Daniel. And by the way, we only got like another, page and a half to do of the book of Daniel. And yet we're going to come out to the ends of time by the time we finish this book. Daniel is going to be given details that lead to the end of time. The end times, we call it. And Jesus will talk about Daniel. And he'll even mention him in Matthew's gospel. Mark's gospel too will say that Jesus' words, by the way, says, as was spoken of by Daniel the prophet, when you see the abomination which causes desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And I love it because Daniel never called himself a prophet, but Jesus calls him one. So I'm pretty sure Jesus knows what he's talking about. We're going to get to study that verse. If you're ever curious, where did that verse come from? That's coming up. Next week, I might make it to the abomination that causes desolation. that is revealed to Daniel, okay, by this angel. We're still going strong on this revelation of who's coming next. Yeah, I think this will build up your faith so much if you can bear with all this history stuff. And if history's not your thing, it never was mine until it came to seeing it actually fulfilled in the Bible and realizing, wow, God, you knew this ahead. This is why I go to all the trouble to tell you the timeline. I know it's a lot of boring stuff, but it's so that you would realize God told him this way ahead, hundreds of years before it happened. Before Alexander the Great ever would march with his 2.5 million men, did God know Alexander the Great would take over the Medo-Persian Empire? Yes. Why is that a big deal? Because how many other books have you read that foretold all the world ruling empires before they rule? And then foretells the end. Which kingdom rules in the very end, according to the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had with the statue? Remember the iron legs, that's Rome, and then the feet partly iron and partly clay, the 10 toes. But what happens? A stone cut, not by human hands, dashes the statue on his feet. The whole thing crumbles. All the kingdoms of this earth crumble, turn into chaff on a summer threshing floor. That's the whole of the wheat blown away. But what happens to the stone? It grows into a great mountain and fills the whole earth. And who's the stone that the builders rejected? The chief cornerstone. It's Jesus. This is a prophecy of God's kingdom come. Now, some people go, wow, you're really into prophecy. I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't Jesus teach his disciples when they said, could you teach us how to pray? And he said, pray in this way. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You guys know this prayer, right? Thy kingdom, what? Come. Thy will be done where? On earth as it is in heaven. Did you know we pray whenever we pray that prayer? God's kingdom come to earth. Did you realize that when you were praying it? I mean, I prayed all the time when I was a kid. Never really processed it. It just was words. Because we had to do it for penance in Catholic Church, you know. You got to do 10 Our Fathers, 5 Hail Marys, you know. And I sped prayed it. Our Father, amen. I said it so fast, I didn't even know what I was saying. I mean, I said all the words. I just didn't process what I was saying. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Where? On earth as it is in heaven. God's kingdom is going to come to earth. And all of you guys that are worried about these unrighteous kings and kingdoms going on right now, listen, I got news for you. They're going to get replaced by a righteous king, the King of Kings. And he's not going to be corrupt. He's not going to be able to be bought off. He's not going to be on the take. You know, all these things I hear about different rulers that, don't worry. He will rule uprightly. And he's going to rule for 1,000 years. I cheated. I read to the end of Book of Revelation. He gives 1,000 years before ushering us into eternity. That this is a super cool thing. So this gets me really excited. The next part of the chapter is going to go on, and even though we're only here to, you know, like in the two late, what would be 272 BC, we still got to go all the way through and come to where we come to the present and then into the end times. Daniel gets a whole layout for us, and that's what makes the book of Daniel super exciting for us to study, and a really good grid for you to lay out when someone says, how do you perceive these end time things? I go, well, I start with the framework that God gave to Daniel, because he gave it from where he was all the way through the end times. And then I take the book of Revelation and I go, see how it fits right here in this last chapter? It fits really good right here. And you can fit these things in. It's like a framework, a picture, like, and I'm visual, so I like pictures, you know. It's like, here's the word picture of the end times and how it's going to lay out. And Christ's kingdom is going to come to earth for 1,000 years. We got a lot to look forward to. So next week, we'll continue Daniel 11. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms. Love to you, and blessings. And for the moms here, you get to take home plumerias and flowers. And and if you want, you can even, I don't know how to prepare the poi, leaves, but Alfred tells me that these are edible, and his mom, like they knew the dishes to how to make the stems into stuff, and I got to learn that. If you know, type me the recipe how to do it. I'm curious because we got Alfred brought 4 little poi plants for us, and they're called the lamb poi, and now they've spread in my garden. We got like pretty good section of crops, so now I got to learn the recipes, what to do with it, you know. So anyway, it's just fun stuff. If you're here in Kona, stop by. We'll get you some flowers from the garden and some edibles of the poi and the.
You have to be careful though, because it has little things in it, doesn't it? Have irritants.
I don't know.
That's
We
what
haven't
makes
learned. I haven't learned it
something
yet, but we're gonna see how it goes. So until next week, blessings and aloha.